As we join in the celebration of 1,100 years since Athelstan became king, we would like to explore what the natural environment would have looked like at that time compared to what we see in Malmesbury today. One day in May, in the year of our Lord, 924. If we could go back 1,100 years and gaze down on Malmesbury one sunny afternoon in May, we might see a gathering of the faithful setting off on a Rogation Day walk. They might visit a local shrine at the roadside, pass by the nearest mill and along the river for a while before walking around the open fields, blessing their surroundings as they went. But what might they see along the way? And how might it be different to the landscape, plants and wildlife we know today? The Domesday Book entry for Malmesbury shows it was surrounded by a great deal of ploughed land, meadow and pasture. You do not have to venture far, though, to find plenty of woodland on land owned by Malmesbury Abbey in Garsden, Charlton or Purton. The Braden Forest was much larger in Athelstan's time. Returning to our Rogation revellers, this may have started as 3 days of penance before Ascension Day, but developed into a fun-filled occasion full of bells, music and feasting. In fact, at the Council of Clefesho in 747, the people were warned not to mix this religious event with sports, horse racing and feasting. It seems unlikely that such a warning would have been given if these activities weren't already being indulged in. The Anglo-Saxon name for these walks was Gangdagus, which eventually became known as Walking Days or Gang Days. The head of the procession would often carry a cross and lead the group to their first meeting point, maybe a mill on the Avon. Above their heads, red kites would have twisted and turned on the May breeze. A recent reintroduction in our times, they were present wherever they could scavenge in the past, even in highly populated areas like London. Next to the river, clouds of damselflies would be emerging at this time, and dragonflies too. Flag iris stand tall along the banks, and an otter might be seen to bob below the river surface. Otters are only just returning to the river in Malmesbury today, but they were far more common in Anglo-Saxon Wessex. Further along the river, away from the bustle of the town, there might have been a beaver lodge. Signs of beaver activity may have only just been seen in Malmesbury this year, but in those days they were still found quite commonly along our rivers. In a lull in the conversation, the sound of a water vole plopping into the river can be heard before it paddles briskly downstream. There would have been lots of them in the Avon, providing a meal for foxes, otters, stoats, weasels, owls, herons, marsh harriers and pike. But their numbers remained healthy, even with all these predators, for centuries. Sadly, water voles have experienced one of the most serious declines of any wild mammal in Britain. Agricultural intensification in the 1940s and 1950s resulted in the loss and degradation of habitat. but the most rapid period of decline was during the 1980s and 1990s, as American mink spread across the countryside. Malmesbury is not immune. An American mink footprint was found on the banks of the Avon in January of this year. A flash of blue catches the walker's eyes as a kingfisher swoops from his perch on an overhanging branch, dips in the shallows and emerges again with a stickleback lodged in his beak. He turns and disappears into a hole in the bank. His young will be fledging soon. This scene can still be seen in Malmesbury today. Kingfishers remain on the river and are spotted frequently close to the Station Road car park. May is a wonderful month for wildflowers, which would have been seen along tracks and paths. The mayflower is frothing on the hawthorn, and the pasture and meadows are bursting with the sheer quantity of flowers which would surprise us today. Many would be familiar: red campion, cowslips and cow parsley, but others which are far less common today would also be abundant, like ragged robin, greater stitchwort and snake's head fritillary. North Wiltshire remains a stronghold of the snake's head fritillary, but there would have been many more in the past when there were more water meadows to support them. Water meadows would also have meant our procession would have been treated to marsh marigolds, self-heal and watermint. After all, that is where the village of Minety gets its name from. The abundance of wildflowers would have led to a profusion of butterflies. According to the butterfly charity, Butterfly Conservation, the number of butterflies have declined across the UK by 80% since the 1970s. Loss of habitat and the use of insecticides has caused this crash in numbers. But 1,100 years ago, there were no insecticides, and the country had much more suitable habitat for these and other insects. It would have been literally buzzing. There would have been red admiral, orange tip, comma and brimstone that we know today, but also some others that we see less frequently, like the marsh fritillary, pearl-bordered fritillary and marbled white. The butterflies are joined by bumblebees, which can be seen enjoying the wealth of pollen and nectar. Our merry band of walkers might have passed cranes, storks, great white egrets and bitterns on the river and not given it a second thought. Cranes and storks were common at this time, but were hunted to extinction in the 14th and 16th centuries respectively. Today, only herons and little egrets can be seen on the Avon in Malmesbury. The procession moves on to bring their prayers to the open fields, where the shoots of the new crops are growing rapidly now. The perfect time to pray for a good harvest to come. They are accompanied by the song of the cuckoos as they amble along, and a cacophony of other birds busy with the breeding season. There would have been many more birds of a wider variety than we are used to today, particularly birds that depend on insects for food. Without insecticides, the number of insects would have been much greater, so flycatchers, swallows and warblers would have been more common too. As the group stood by the open fields, they would see a more open landscape than we are used to. Hedges existed, of course. We still have evidence today of Bronze Age hedges in our landscape. But the large areas of land divided into strips would have looked quite different to the fields surrounding Malmesbury today. The undulating ridge and furrow pattern created by the oxen-pulled ploughs would have given a distinctive look to the land. In recent years, there has been a trend to remove more of our hedgerows. But with few good areas for wildlife, they have become a lifeline, a means of linking one valuable habitat with another. What is more, many animals have evolved to take advantage of our hedges for both food and shelter. Today we need our network of hedges more than ever. The noise from the music and chatter of the procession might have startled a hare or leveret crouching in the grass, or roe deer with fawns grazing in the fields. There were no rabbits though. The Normans introduced those after 1066, and there weren't any fallow deer, another Norman introduction, water deer, sika or muntjac. The fields would have been a haven for skylarks, lapwings and curlew. Flushed from their nests on the ground by the trail of walkers, they would have been a regular sight. They are all red-listed birds today, although there are conservation programs in place trying to increase their numbers. Passing through some woodland, bluebells would have been in bloom. Foxgloves and ramsons would have all contributed their distinctive colours and scents. At the front of the procession, a loud chucking noise can be heard coming from the branches of a tree. As heads turn to look, a squirrel can be seen, protesting at their presence. The squirrel is a rusty orange colour, with tufts on the ears. It must have kittens in a dray somewhere nearby. Luckily for the squirrel, the walking party are focused on blessing the land. There are no grey squirrels in Anglo-Saxon Wessex. They weren't introduced until 1876 from North America, when they were released into the grounds of stately homes as an ornamental species. Time has passed, and the sun is getting lower in the sky. There are foxes, badgers and hedgehogs in the wood. But, more importantly, there are also red deer, wild boar and even wolves. All of these animals will have young at this time of year and can be aggressive if they think they are threatened. It is time to head back through the fields to the safety of the town before the sun goes down. As the light fades and walkers stroll drowsily towards the town, a nightingale can be heard singing from some scrub at the edge of the wood. Nightingales are rarely heard in Britain today. Climate change is the main problem, but as insectivores, they also suffer due to the desperate decline in insect numbers in recent years as well. According to the conservation charity BugLife, insects in the UK declined by 60% between 2004 and 2021. Moths would have taken over from the butterflies as dusk crept on, along with the maybugs buzzing loudly and clumsily past. Add to that flying dung beetles, and the greater horseshoe bat would have eaten well. Then, silently, a white ghostly figure drifts across the meadow. A barn owl is hunting voles, harvest mice, or even one of the unsuspecting bats. It is twilight now, and the swifts are finally ceasing their screeching as they settle in the abbey roof for the night. The gang day has drawn to a close for another year, and a full moon is shining down on the silver river. Lying in their beds at night, our walkers might fall asleep to the sounds of a tawny owl calling, the corncrake's rasping rattle, or maybe